What was your finest moment of revenge? I ground up laxatives and tainted all my kitchen fridge food with it to figure out which of my 7 roommates was eating all my food, while I survived off a secret stash in my mini fridge. I found out who did it very quickly. This may seem small, but it was the most satisfying thing I have ever done. When I was in the 7th grade, I sat behind a jerk who hated me and enjoyed being annoying. Every single goddamn day he would lean back in his chair and hit the front of my desk. Over and ever again. If I was trying to write something, he would do it even harder. So one day I decided enough was enough, and in the middle of a lesson he started again. So I waited, and right as he was leaning his chair back fast, trying to knock my desk hard, I pulled it back. Without my desk behind him, his chair tipped right over, and he hit the ground hard. I can still clearly remember him whispering "you bitch" beneath the laughter of the whole class and the teacher yelling at him to get up. The look on his face was a mixture of shock, embarrassment and pure rage as he looked up at me from the floor. Bastard never ducked with me again. A shitty repair shop in Moab messed up our car, which left us stranded in a nearby national park. We called and demanded they tow the vehicle in, and while they said they'd come get us, they never did. When we talked with park rangers, they were quite familiar with the shop, the biggest in town, and with a terrible reputation. We were on our honeymoon and had more time on our hands than I imagine most travelers do. We went to the shop, demanded a full refund, and when they refused, we sat out front on the curb in our camp chairs for 2 days with homemade protest signs. I was overwhelmed with the support we got from locals, who honked and waved, stopped and chatted with us, and shared their own stories of horror. The owner called the cops on us, but the joke was on him. We'd already notified the police we'd be protesting, and were well within our rights in doing so. In the end, the shop owner refunded all our money and left visibly distressed when we told him that even with the refund, we weren't sure we were ready to leave town. Eventually we did, but not before filing complaints with the Better Business Bureau and every review site we could find. They'd already been booted from the Chamber of Commerce. We ended up becoming friends with an awesome local mechanic and having a great story to tell. Justice was served, and without a tinge of guilt. Recently posted this, but long story short, and kid I was friends with hit me in the balls 3 times in one night. He then called me a wee baby and got in my face. He tried to make me flinch by half swinging at me. I didn't flinch, but instead headbutted him with everything I had, crushed his nose, blood pouring out of his face. I had a tiny cut in the center of my forehead, with 1 line of blood running down my face. I looked ducking psychotic, but badass. Also, duck you for that, David. When I was 12 years old, a kid beat me up at a birthday party for reasons unknown. 4 years later, the kid is a pitcher, and a very good one at that, for his school in the playoffs. I was playing for the other team. After going 0-3 to start the game, I hit a walk-off home run off of him to advance to the next round. Kid actually started crying on the mound. I don't think I've ever had a bigger smile than I did in that moment. Still have the ball in my apartment at college. During our 100 multiple choice law exam, I wrote all my answers on the original exam page and colored in wrong answers on the Scantron sheet. The girl who copied me since day one thought she was going to pass this exam worth 30% of our final mark. She looked over and copied almost each of my Scantron answer, then guessed a few, handed it in, and left for the winter break. I erased all my old answers, put the correct answers in, handed it in, and left. I got 71/100ths and barely managed to pass that class. I'll find out what she got on Tuesday when I maybe see her with a gun at my locker. When I was 11 years old, I was bullied by a 12-year-old boy. He would steal things from my lunch every day. I got sick of it and decided to do something about it. One day, I brought a super hot pepper in my lunch and pretended to be really excited about it. Sure enough, the boy comes over, snatches it from my hand, and pops it in his mouth. He practically exploded in pain, writhing around the floor, unable to handle the heat. I calmly looked at him and told him that drinking a nice glass of cold water would help immensely. He did so. This promptly magnified the pain 100x. He never stole food from me again. I regret nothing. So my grandfather was driving and an obviously drunk man threw a rock and shattered his windshield. My grandfather talked to him and told him, if you give me your real number, I'll only have you pay for half of the windshield, or we can figure something out. The guy turned out to give him a fake number. A year later, my grandfather picks up a guy from Park and Ride, carpooling. He happens to be the man that shattered his windshield. They are driving on the freeway and the guy doesn't recognize him. He's being rude and talking on his phone. My grandpa asks to see his phone and throws it out the window. The guy freaks out and my grandpa goes, remember me? He then made him get out of the car. Okay, I have 2 older brothers. Eldest is a good person. The middle is a monster. He is a meth-addled felon. He has tortured my family for 20 years and I have taken the brunt of the assault as the only person willing to openly challenge him. He stole my mother's wedding rings, my grandmother's car, and my TV, to name a few things. My family has decided to try again, to welcome him back into their lives, so I followed suit. It's Christmas 2013. Best holiday celebrations I could never imagine. All is well. Middle brother walks in the door to collect presents 2 days after celebrations. Strike 1. Middle brother drops bag of drugs when he walks in the door. Strike 2. Middle brother criticizes eldest brother's renovations and tells my grandmother she wasted her money. Strike 3. In the car on the way home, decided it's best to go back into town together so it saves someone a trip. Middle brother asks me for my passport. I say no, I can't do that. Middle brother concocts magical story where I have borrowed his ID to get into clubs when I was a teenager. Lies. I did not and would not. He says he needs it to get into a party. He's £300 and 35 and would never be carded under any circumstances. Middle brother differs to his standard method of persuasion and starts yelling and is getting increasingly loud and argumentative. I tell him that it is illegal and that it would be very bad for him if he gets caught. There's a line somewhere between asking and demanding something of someone. He crosses it. My heart races like it used to when I was a boy, when he used to follow my friends and I and beat the shit out of us with his friends. I remember him pulling me out of a lake where I almost drowned. But it's not him anymore. The brother I knew is gone, and there's a total stranger directly behind me demanding the symbol of my liberty. Strike ducking 4. I tell him that if he mentions my passport again on the ride home, I will crane the steering wheel into a snowbank and beat him to within an inch of his life. I hear give me your passport in the voice of a man I don't know, from a face I don't recognize. Blood and adrenaline surge from my heart faster and more rapidly than I have ever felt. We pull into a parking lot. I open my door and wait patiently until that ducking asshole works up the courage to fight me. He steps out and yells something I don't hear. I tell him that I'll give him one more chance to get back in the car without saying a word about my passport ever again. He says passport with a wily grin and expects me to be the same cowering boy that I used to be. The same kid who loved him and adored him and wanted nothing else but to be just like him. I connect the quickest and hardest fist I've ever thrown against another person directly onto his chin. Blood spurts out of his mouth with the second blow. He hits me twice above and below my right eye. I completely lose my shit and wail on the left side of his face until it is a broken and bloody ruin. If you're reading this, middle brother, fuck you. Edit. You bet your ass I felt no guilt. When I was a kid, probably 4 or 5 years old, I was watching Dumbo with my neighbor. The elephants on Parade Part were scary as all hell to me back then. And I peed my pants. My neighbor told everyone in my pre-K class and would not stop calling me the pants peer for weeks. Finally, one day I slept over at her house and took a pair of her pants out her closet, put them on, and peed in them. I woke her up to show her, and that's the story of how I became the 2-time pants peer. TL. Doctor got revenge on a girl by putting her pants on and peeing in them. There was a guy in high school who was a complete ass to me. For a couple years, I decided to exact revenge via magazine. I went to the school library and pulled subscription cards out of every female magazine I could get my hands on, and a few strange ones like Psychology Today and Architectural Digest, and filled out cards in his name, with his address, and checked bill me later. I overheard him complaining a few months later how he kept getting all these magazines he never ordered, and it was getting irritating. Score. Driving to drop someone off, my radar detector went off. Saw a cop sitting in a parking lot. Dropped off my friend and headed back. The whole way some ass is tailgating me. Speed limit's 40. I'm doing 45. And he's so close I can't see his headlights. We come up to a traffic circle, and he tries to pass me on the right. I sped up, and he kept trying. We hit about 80 to 90 with him on the shoulder. Come up to the crest of a hill and I know the cop is right on the other side. I hit the brakes and he flew up over the hill. Had to be doing 90 in a 40. I even stopped to let the cop out of the parking lot. Most satisfying thing ever. Years ago, living in an apartment in Johannesburg, the block consisted mostly of elderly folk and a few young working couples like me and my wife, who generally hit the sack early. The place was like a morgue after 10 PM, until a couple of guys move into the place below us. Party types, who would whoop it up till dawn. If anyone complained, they'd quickly get threatening. The owner of the apartment was one of the guys' dad, so they had no fear of being kicked out. One evening, around midnight, they hooked up with some mates and girls to go clubbing. They were outside in the road, talking, yelling, girls screeching, bedlam. Eventually they depart. I was furious, but being an original 90-pound wimp, felt helpless. Then I remembered the tube of superglue in my desk drawer. I went to their flat, which had a serious security gate protecting the front door. I put the glue nozzle into the gate lock, a heavy-duty bolt lock, and squeezed the sucker dry. Couple of hours later, lying in bed, I hear the party hardies arrive back. Same dealers when they left, making a hell of a commotion as they spill out their cars and head for the apartment. Then silence. Later I heard they ended up breaking a toilet window and getting in that way. The girlfriends of course were having none of it, so they buggered off, as did the mates. The next day they had to get a locksmith who used a blowtorch to cut the lock out of its steel casing. This damaged the door behind, so both gate and door had to be replaced, along with the bathroom window. Because these boneheads did not have the money for all this, the dad who owned the apartment had to cough. He was so pissed off that he kicked out the roommate. From then on, it was the quietest flat in the building. When I was in 4th grade, I was pushed around a lot by a kid who thought he was hot shit. I told my parents. I told my teacher. They told the teacher and the principal. No avail. So, one day on the stairs he kicks the back of my shoe making it pop off and fall. I turn and punch him in the stomach. He keeled over and rolled/fell down about 5 to 6 stairs to the next landing. I didn't even get in trouble, and even though he is still an asshole, he never dared to touch me again. Please subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.